Welcome, everyone. I was already introduced, so I won't repeat that, but it's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here with you and to have the chance to guide this particular conversation, perhaps one of the most important in our agenda today. I'll quickly introduce our panel and give a very short introduction and then move on to what I hope will be a lively conversation with the full group. We have with us His Excellency Khalid bin Abdulaziz AlFalih, Minister of Investment of Saudi Arabia. Welcome. We have Dr. Jens Frederiksen, President, University of New Haven, United States, and obviously you saw them both with the very important announcement earlier just now. Justina Nixon-Saintil, Vice President and Chief Impact Officer, IBM, United States. And last but not least, Andreas Schleicher, Directorate for Education and Skills, or the OECD. Welcome to all of you. Now, we're talking about this particular topic in the midst of major economic shifts and major changes in terms of how certain or uncertain the economic and investment outlook is. In that particular uncertainty, there is potentially less cross-border investment. There is potentially less fiscal firepower in certain countries. And yet, there couldn't be a more important moment to think about having a new kind of investment, new types of innovation, building out new industries, and most importantly, investing in human capital and workforce transformation. And that's going to be very much our topic for today. And let me first turn to our host country to share more about how you see that relationship between investment and human capital and workforce development. Over to you, Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Saadia. And I think while you're here moderating, let me also reiterate our appreciation for the role that the World Economic Forum plays in bringing all of us in the global community ready for the challenges and the opportunity that the world brings, and the focus you've had within the WEF on human capital amongst the many crucial issues that you've been addressing globally. Let me also extend thanks and appreciation to His Excellency Minister Al-Banyan, both from a human capital program role where he leads the executive committee, but also as Minister of Education, and as someone who's been both an investor and a human capital leader in his earlier career with SABIC. He and I worked together on, when I was in Aramco and he was on SABIC, on preparing the kingdom's workforce for the future that we're seeing today. And I have to say, we did not anticipate all of the change, but certainly we worked with the government at that time. This is going back 20 plus years. This is how far back he goes in terms of his passion and commitment. I also, since I'm the first speaker, I want to congratulate him and the education community of Saudi Arabia for the fantastic performance yesterday at the Geneva Inventions exhibit, where Saudi Arabia, I think, was one of the largest winners. I think the 6 prizes, 120 medals, both from primary education as well as from our great universities. So congratulations. But you know, this is a continuation of an ecosystem investment in the kingdom that is deeply rooted from the creation of the kingdom and His Majesty King Abdulaziz, the founder, who built into the first priorities of the government, the concession with Aramco. Everything that was done 80, 90 years ago was about building the capabilities of the Saudi people. Going specifically to your question, I think, and I know, having been on both sides, government, private, as well as a parent and responsible for educating my children, that investment and education are very much symbiotic. Investments, and I shouldn't say education, but skill development, lifelong education, are very much symbiotic. Investments create a demand pull, on skills development, which influences how the universities, vocational schools, and people find what are the signals from the market that these investors are doing. And that creates a talent pool that in itself becomes the magnet for attracting new investments. So it's very much a virtuous cycle that we have seen at play in Saudi Arabia. And to just give you some data points about the focus, the dual focus that Vision 2030 under the leadership of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, who I think if you need a signal, he chairs the Human Capability Program. I think it's probably the only program amongst the VRPs that he chairs. So this is the priority he gives it. But he also gives a lot of focus on investment. And if you see what we've done over the last 10 years in investment, our FDI has quadrupled in terms of flows. Our FDI stock has gone up almost double to where it is today. And as a result, jobs within these foreign investment companies have gone up by 40%, and Saudis in foreign investments have doubled. Our investor licenses have gone up by about a factor of 9 to 10. And also, our regional headquarter number has gone up to 600 from 5 before the vision was launched. So investments are taking the signals that the kingdom is not only rich with capital, it's not only rich with natural resources, oil, minerals, it's not only a large market integrated well with our GCC partners, but it's a country that increasingly has the magnet, as I mentioned, for efficiency-seeking investment, not just resource-seeking investment, which is undisputably today in a world where there is competition for talent. The magnet for efficiency-seeking investment is talent, and not only do we have the domestically, the indigenous resources of Saudi Arabia, 60% of our population are below 30, and they're getting one of our largest investments by the government in education across the value chain of education, but we're also an open economy. So being open means your markets are open, your investment flows in and out are open, but also your talent pool is open for investment. Last point, we see human skill development value chain from education to executive programs to vocational school. We see that as one of our most important investment verticals. I spend more time trying to create investments in human skill development, including education. We just witnessed the last and the latest great fruit of this investment we make in our time of attracting human skill developers. We see that as a key vertical within our investment because it's a vertical, but it cuts horizontally across every sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A lot of very important points. And Justina, let me take it straight over to you from your vantage point in the private sector, in the United States in particular, but also elsewhere in the world. How do you see this relationship between investment and human capital and workforce development?
Yeah, so, IBM has recognized that we need to invest in upskilling and reskilling, especially when you have a disruptive technology like AI, to make sure that we are preparing people for the jobs of today, but also the jobs of the future. This makes a difference for GDP. This makes a difference for hiring the right talent into the private sector, and really makes a difference for economic mobility. So we have a partnership with MCIT where we made a commitment to skill 100,000 Saudis over the next few years. And we're actually over halfway to that target of 100,000. And it's in partnerships with the National E-Learning Center, with MCIT and many other organizations and universities in the kingdom that is enabling these types of partnerships. When you think about AI as a disruptive technology, we have invested in the kingdom, for example, a recent partnership with Lenovo to innovate around Gen AI, but we also implemented on our Watson X platform an Arabic LLM, large language model, to really spur innovation and new ideas around AI. But with that comes the focus on skilling and upskilling and making sure that we have people that understand AI, both from AI fluency and literacy, but also AI builders, people who can actually create these models, understand AI, and could really innovate for the next solutions that can really make a difference around the kingdom. IBM has a platform called IBM Skills Build, and it's freely available to anyone. And we partner with universities, we partner with nonprofit organizations, we also partner with K-12 school systems to provide access to free training, free learning pathways, and credentials that enable them to be skilled in AI, in cyber, in analytics, data analytics, and so much more. But of course, AI is in demand. It's what we hear about the most. It's what universities are incorporating into their curriculum. They're launching new career learning paths around AI, and we are providing that partnership and that access for free because we understand the importance to invest in community and make sure that we're upskilling all of society. So that is a huge focus of ours, not just in the kingdom, but globally.
Thank you very much. So we've covered there the demand side. Let's talk a bit about the supply side, and I'd like to talk both upstream and downstream, and perhaps come to you first, Jens, about the more downstream element around higher education. And how do you think things are faring there? Is that view around investing for the future truly present, or are there major gaps and shortfalls in your view?
Well, I think there is absolutely gaps, right? If we look at, if we take on board the notion that human capital is our greatest asset, in terms of investment, the University of New Haven is a private not-for-profit. So in some ways, we're not the beneficiary of public sector investment. And it's in some ways, paradoxically, sort of an advantage because the business model is intimately tied to our ability to deliver ROI, right? And so in some ways, our investors are our parents and students, our private sector, corporates, industry, and then ultimately philanthropy, right? And so the fact that the business model is so intimately tied to it creates a degree of innovation and experimentation and entrepreneurship around ROI and really leaning into delivering on that. And so I think for institutions like ours, I mean, I'm sure everybody follows sort of higher education news in the US, and public confidence is obviously at an all-time low. And in many ways, that's tied to the question around relevance of higher education. Does it translate to outcomes, the inflationary costs? There are all these alternatives now in play. And so I think it's incumbent upon institutions to really lean into this notion of delivering ROI. And the ROI metric has become more complex in terms of it's not just socioeconomic, it's civic, it's personal, it's psychological. And so you take on board a mandate to deliver as a private institution in a way that warrants that investment of your students and ultimately families. And part of that is tied to the whole model is now focused on not just A's and B's, but experiential learning. We talk about AI, both being market ready, but in some ways also being ahead, helping to forecast what is to be expected. And so I think, I mean, if we just look at the ROI of those three investor groups, students and parents, and their expectations have changed dramatically. Industry and private sector, we hear a lot from private sector, there is this gap between academia and industry. We're not providing sort of market responsiveness, so really building in industry and the corporate sector into the curriculum in really thoughtful ways of providing that to students to where it's not just detached, and at the end of the day, when you graduate, there is no expectation that you contribute from an economic development standpoint. And so I think, and then sort of last but not least, philanthropy, right? Impact investing, they want to see an ROI. They want to see the fact that it's not opportunity costs and students aren't ready, and we have 40 million Americans that began college but didn't, I mean, you want to talk about opportunity costs, right? And so there is an expectation around relevance. there is a paradigm shift that I think is happening and has to happen with this shift in public confidence. So I'd say from an investment perspective, yes, I mean, again, taking on board that it's the greatest asset, the more investment, the better, but targeted and really thoughtful around deliverables and a general paradigm shift.
Thank you very much. Our conversation is really meant to be forward-looking, taking a view into where things are headed, and take a bit more of a long-term time frame. The types of changes that you've just described that happened over the last decade here in the Kingdom. Andreas, from your perspective, what types of gaps, concerns, risks, and opportunities do you see when you think about that younger cohort that will be part of the workforce in 10 or 15 years' time?
Yeah, you know, one of the hardest decisions that we as individuals and countries have to make is the balance between investing in the present and investing in the future. And I think you just heard Rick Hanushek, you know, investing in skills in the future really pays off. Now, I think he quoted numbers. If this country, the Kingdom, would raise the quality of its skills among young people by just one school year, that's over $4 trillion over the working life of people. You get everybody to the baseline level on our global PISA test, and that's almost $10 trillion. So the promise, the value proposition is very, very clear. The trouble is that just putting more money into our current institutional structures is not necessarily the best route to get you there. And I give you an example. You know, the United States spends over 10 times as much per student than Vietnam. But Vietnam gets better results these days when you look at subjects like mathematics. So it's really about how do we reconfigure, you know, the people, the time, the technology in education to get superior outcomes. And we're just at the beginning of that. You know, Justina, you mentioned the, you know, power of AI. It's not just, you know, changing the demand for skills. It's very much changing also educational opportunity, what we can actually do. And I think about, you know, nurse plus AI equals doctor. Now, think about, you know, vocational education and training plus AI equals engineer. Think about average teacher plus AI, expert teacher, you know, someone who's also a good coach, a mentor, a facilitator. And I think that's the way we need to look at this. And I think reconfiguring, you know, the inputs in education to get superior outcomes. The world provides a great laboratory. You know, find amazing systems that have over the last, you know, decades seen incredible progress on this. Unfortunately, most of them are in Asia. It's very, very hard to find that, you know, on the Western world. But that's really important. The second part, I think, when you talk about investment, is anything you can do to move away from lumpy degrees and qualification to better signals that tell you what people actually know and can do, and that give people greater ownership over what they learn and how they learn and where they learn and when in their learn, is going to pay high returns. Now, micro-credentials will take over, you know, some of that, you know, very heavy degree structures. Now, sometimes, you know, college degrees these days little more than the receipt for the tuition you pay. You know, you have lots of young people who have great degrees who have difficulties finding good jobs, and employers tell you they cannot find the people with the skills we need. And better integrating the world of work and learning. I think we talked about this. Those are the kind of, you know, investments that hold the greatest promise. You know, making learning more granular, giving people greater ownership in shaping their pathways. The last point I want to make, and I think this hasn't come up yet, but I think it's incredibly important, is investment in shaping the demand for skills. You know, take the two largest economies of the OECD, United States and Japan. Japan is probably the best human capabilities now. Very, very talented kind of young people, but its labor market is so siloed, so rigid, that people never get a chance to use their skills, women particularly. You take the United States, where the skills pool starting from school is actually very patchy. Some extremely greatly skilled people, but also some really large trail at the bottom of the distribution. But no economy is better than the US in extracting value from the skills of people, translating better skills into better jobs and better lives. And I think that's the part, you know, where investment is incredibly important, and that we, you know, otherwise you just invest in people and they're going to leave your country.
Thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to try, if we can, to squeeze in 2 rounds of questions from both of you. We'll see. We'll try. Jens, you've mentioned ROI, and Andreas, you have mentioned one of the potential best investments around artificial intelligence and augmenting human work. Minister, perhaps over to you. If you were to be constrained in terms of resources, and of course you're in the happy situation of not necessarily being constrained, and if you were to think about the advice that could be offered to other public sector entities, where do you think the biggest bet should be around investment in human capital?
I think, as we've heard from our great panelists, making sure that the development of the human being going into the workforce and continuing to develop that human being and that human capital through their lifetime, not just through their careers, has to take into consideration a balanced approach where discipline skills are the deep vertical that we need to educate people with, but I think more importantly, and just as importantly, is equipping them with the ability to continue to upgrade those skills, because the world is changing so fast. You know, the half-life of the knowledge you learn from school is getting shorter and shorter. And so rote learning of the past is no longer appropriate. Experiential learning, as Jens said, and then bringing in the corporate, as we heard about the IBM experience globally and the great effort they're making here. And I think just as important is building the character, the values of the individual. We heard it from Her Excellency Sarah from the UAE. Values are key. People have to survive. Life is getting more competitive, not less, with all of the luxuries of technology and comforts of life. People are under continuous pressure to compete in the workplace. So building the character of the individual is something that we as parents need to do from birth. We need to nurture. We need to follow it through the schools. So making sure that teachers are also able to build that human character and that resilience, and then unleashing that human capital in the world with the agility to move. People used to always think of vertical upward mobility of human capital, and today it's not an upward, it's zigzagging. People are mobile across disciplines, but they're also mobile across organizations, and they're mobile across countries. And this is going to only accelerate. And we have to build it into our people that that's not only acceptable, that's good. Develop the skills, know the pluses and minuses, and go and enjoy life, and don't be too much stressed, because also mental pressures are mounting. Sorry I took too long.
Thank you very much. And that's actually exactly what we found in our work on the future of jobs at the World Economic Forum, that there is a need, of course, to focus on technological skills, but character, leadership, social influence, analytical thinking, creativity, values, these are the things that will also really matter in the intelligent age. Jens, your thoughts?
Well, I would echo those statements, right? I think in interesting ways, when I talked about sort of a more comprehensive sense of ROI and expectations around higher education, it is that you're stuck in these dueling demands that the marketplace has. We hear from employers all the time that students aren't ready to walk in, right? So you need the readiness and the responsiveness to the market, but you also need to, in some ways, be forecasting what are those roles, teaching. So there is an intense focus on the technical. But if you disregard that, in some ways, you're obsolete and outdated within a short period of time, right? So the ability to teach critical thinking, agility, flexibility, global awareness, a real understanding of the dynamism, if you will. And those are in some ways sort of contrasting and dueling, competing. And I think that's the ask of universities, that you both have to be demand-driven. I mean, it's beyond readiness, right? So it's, in some ways, it's exactly that, right? It's capturing that we live in times where the uncertainty and the tectonics on which we stand are moving at such a rapid pace, and then you add AI to that, and the redundancies, the job displacement that will, so the ability to have flexibility and also develop, in some ways, the human component of taste, awareness, interpretation, and really being able to ask the questions, because in many instances AI can certainly answer them, right? So are we asking the right questions, the ethical questions? And so in those regards, I think a lot is being asked of higher education, and those institutions that rise to that moment as at this inflection point, I think will thrive, and students will gravitate towards it, as will industry.
Thank you. Justina?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity for ROI for the corporate sector is in two ways, right? First, how do you upskill and reskill your own workforce? And that is a priority, I think, for every company, making sure that everyone has the right skills. Again, right now, right, huge focus on AI, but how do you make sure your workforce is ready? But all of the other skills we mentioned, that is a priority, right? And lifelong learning, I know this is a theme we hear a lot, but right now it's AI, next it will be quantum, right? So how do you make sure that you have a workforce that is always ready to learn and adapt? And I think that's a huge priority for corporates. The second thing is, how do we help society? And that's a huge part of the work that we do as well, in partnership with universities. Bringing our platform, What's Next, to universities, helping with capstone projects, making sure students understand how to innovate, how to create new ideas, leveraging AI. But also, more broadly, how do we make sure everyone has AI literacy and fluency? And I think that's going to uplift the workforce overall. So those are areas where we want to invest and make sure that we have that ROI for us, for our clients, but also for society at large.
Thank you. Andreas?
Yeah, I think His Excellency is really, put the finger on the point. It's all about, identity and belonging beyond all the kind of technical skills. Now, if you do not know who you are, you're not going to be open to uncertainty and change. If you need to learn to live with yourself, to live with people who are different from you, to learn to live with this planet. Now, those things we must not forget, and that's why, education, skill development is always going to be a relational experience, never just a transactional business. And that brings me to the point, as much as I'm a believer in, technology and transforming learning, AI is not a magic power. It's just an incredible accelerator, an amazing amplifier. It's going to amplify, good ideas in the same way it accelerates poor ideas. And that brings me to the point, if I had to ask, where to invest in the K-12 education, it is still in the quality of teachers. You cannot bypass this. I think the quality of education, the quality of learning will never exceed the quality of the people working there. And I think that is where I would, put my bet at the moment still.
Thank you very much. We then do have time for that one final round. And the thoughts that you would want everybody here to carry throughout the day as they think through the broader picture around workforce development and investment. And I'll reverse the order here and give the final word to His Excellency. So Andreas, back over to you. In 30 seconds, the one thought that you'd want everybody here to carry with them today. Invest in yourself. I think that's where things start. And invest in the people around you, and invest in your country. And I think the development of knowledge and skills, attitudes and values will be the foundation for our future as countries. Justina?
So I would say find opportunities to take advantage of free platforms that provide access to different learning pathways, right? Again, AI is extremely critical right now, but workplace learning skills as well. And IBM has that through IBM Skills Build. And the other thing I would say is there's a sense of urgency around this. There are disruptive technologies. We need to invest in countries and society, and we want to make sure no one is being left behind. So I would say let's move with a sense of urgency around skilling and upskilling and making sure everyone is ready for the workforce.
Yes.
I'd quickly say I don't think higher education has ever been more important. I think these dueling demands will determine, as we move this through this incredibly dynamic period, I think higher education and the expectations of what higher education can do.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Well, I would just two thoughts. First of all, reinforcing what we have been saying on the panel and even before the panel, that this is a collective responsibility. Human beings have been, are today, and will continue forever to be at the center no matter what the technological advancements, AI, quantum, they're just a continuation of tools that are available to us and advancements. And some of them are step changes, some of them are gradual, but let's put it in context. It is humans at the center, and it's a collective responsibility. We should not point at the education and say they need to prepare the workforce for the future. It's the responsibility of individuals, of parents, for young children, and certainly of corporates. And public-private partnership in this area has never been more strong. My last thought as the Minister of Saudi Arabia is to predict that we have moved from a place where people were looking at the kingdom as a place to extract natural resources and invest in those, to a place where people invest because of market and capital. In the future, with this great effort and these partnerships globally, domestically, and this awareness and enlightenment that His Royal Highness is leading around human capital, I predict that in the next decade, Saudi Arabia will be the destination for investment because we have that magnet. We have that great local, international talent blended in an ecosystem that promotes continuous learning and readiness for a future we cannot define.
Thank you very much. A very powerful vision for us to end on. Thank you, Andreas, Justina, Jens, and Your Excellency.